Bang, and we're off. Episode 5 of the Border Wars podcast. We're down a man this week. It's just me and Smitty here with y'all tonight. How you doing, Smitty?
Good. R.I.P. Sawyer. He's
Yeah,
gotta do some work. He's back to work.
yeah. Someone's got to feed the masses, man. Sawyer's the one to do it. So we miss
Yeah.
him, but show goes on. We had tentatively possible reschedule to tomorrow night, but your boy Smitty's got a hot date for tomorrow night, so he's not able to reschedule.
Yeah, we were supposed to do it tonight, but old Whitney's got to do some dog sitting, so it worked out perfectly
Yeah,
for me at least.
yeah, exactly. All right, well, let's just jump right in because, man, each week I just got to say the Last Dance does not disappoint. It keeps on getting better and better every week, and last night were probably two of the most emotional episodes thus far. Who knows what to expect for episodes 9 and 10? But man, yesterday was just full of drama. Last night, I was glued to the television, couldn't stop watching. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Episode 7 opens with a press conference by Jerry Krause, and you finally see where that audio from the theme intro comes in, where Jerry Krause says there's no backstabbing going on here. He was asked a question by Craig Sager, who was with TNT at the time, about the inner turmoil of the front office and Phil Jackson, and how the team was moving forward with all the backstabbing. And that didn't get a great reaction from Jerry Krause. It didn't get a great reaction from the other reporters there in the room at the time.
No, I just imagine like all the other reporters just pissed off at him that they had to probably drive all the way down there, and that interview was less than 2 minutes long.
Yeah. The quote of the night was, "Way to go, Craig."
Yeah, we all know someone named Craig, so
Yeah.
that I immediately think of the Craig that I know, and just you relate to it and cracks
Yeah.
me up.
It reminded me. Do you remember the meme that was going around of that hockey dad banging on the glass and he shatters it onto the ice? So he's like banging on the glass on the side of like a high school hockey rink, and the ice shatters down, and the game stops. You just hear this lady in the back go, "Way to go, Paul!" That's exactly what it reminded me of. Exactly what it reminded me of. Because Craig Sager is like one of the late great Craig Sager was like one of the most respected like reporters in basketball, but he did not have any fans in that press room that day.
Yeah, I mean, my question is, what do you expect with that kind of questioning? I know he's kind of getting into the nitty gritty of it, and he's probably asking questions that fans and other people want to know, but I think he had to kind of word it a little bit better, and he would have gotten a little bit better response. But I understand the question, but yeah, I think he should have just done just a little bit better wording on that one.
Yeah, and I think what people have to understand is that, at least from my perspective, Krause put himself in that situation. I mean, he was the one who declared, "We're not restructuring Pippen's contract. He's not coming back at the end of this season. We're not renewing Phil Jackson's contract. He's not coming back. We hope to have Michael back, but if he decides it's his time to end with the Bulls dynasty, so be it." And that was a situation entirely manufactured by Jerry Krause. And he may think in his mind there's no backstabbing going on, but the comments he's made in the locker room, in the media, the comments he made after the '93 championship against the Phoenix Suns, he said, "Oh, it's not about just the team. The team the team is a great team, but this organization is world class." He's trying to take all this credit for something that was clearly Phil Jackson's responsibility, Michael Jordan's responsibility, and the rest of the guys on the floor. So to take credit and say, "Oh yeah, it's the front office that's the reason this is a great organization," he had been taking those kind of shots across the bow for years. So I think the question, while maybe he views it as unfair, was one he certainly set himself up for.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think during the first episode, I had said, I kind of didn't hate him like everybody else, but the deeper that we get into the series, I'm kind of like, why did he do this? I made the comment in the first episode about maybe he wanted to show everybody that he could do it without Jordan, without Phil Jackson. But, when it's good, it's good. And when it's bad, it's bad. It's like, why would you want to tear down, or even at least entertain the thought of keeping Phil Jackson, at least Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan. I know that
Yeah.
there's differences between him and Pippen, and obviously Horace Grant was already gone by '98. At least keep those two centerpieces there to at least drive up revenue, at least get some wins, try to get some playoff pushes if it was just going to be just Jordan and Phil Jackson. Because in my opinion, I was going to ask your thoughts about this. Phil Jackson to me has got to be the greatest NBA coach of all time. I mean, he won 6 in Chicago and 5 in LA. I mean, what's your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah,
I think he was a great Go ahead.
it's interesting because I think he's the greatest modern day coach of all time. You have to look at the success of Red Auerbach in Boston for that long stretch and how he was able to win championship after championship. He did that basically pulling all the strings. He was in charge in the front office. He was the general manager, the coach. He finagled he drafted Larry Bird before he had even graduated. He traded essentially the rights to like a circus show in Boston to another team at the time to be able to draft Bill Russell #1. Like he traded a revenue stream for the Garden at the time in Boston to be able to draft Bill Russell. So like comprehensively, it's Red Auerbach and Phil Jackson like 1A, 1B. But in terms of modern day, the only other guy I could think of that comes close to Phil Jackson is Pat Riley. Besides that, there's really no one even in a stratosphere in terms of, I guess Popovich to a certain extent. Popovich and Riley are the two closest things to Phil Jackson, but they don't even sniff 11. Popovich has 5. I don't know how many Riley has off the top of my head. He has at least 1 with the Heat and several with I think 5 with the Lakers. So he has 6 championships. So yeah, modern day coach Phil Jackson is leaps and bounds ahead. And people always look to his New York Knicks tenure as being relatively unsuccessful, and they say that possibly tarnishes his reputation. But just look at the revolving door of people that have tried to go in there and right the ship in New York. He brought in the talent that they needed to take it to the next level. It's just interference from up above from James Dolan, probably the most difficult man to work for in sports. So yeah, I think Phil Jackson has 13 championships all time as a player and as a coach. That's incredible. He's in no doubt one of the greatest to ever do it, if not the greatest coach of all time. So yeah, I would agree with you there. If he's not the greatest, he's definitely one of the greatest.
Yeah, and I think we can dive into it a little bit later on in the episode, but just the way he not only just the X's and O's, he obviously did the triangle offense, but a player's coach, that's kind of something that's really not seen very much today. You see a lot of players that practically run the team themselves,
Yeah.
I'm not going to name any names, but
LeBron James.
yeah.
Yeah. I know I coach youth basketball, and I know it's on a completely different level. I coach, 7th grade A team. But part of having a successful team and getting the best out of those guys, in my opinion, was to connect with them on a personal level, to try and build a relationship with them and figure out what makes them tick, figure out what to say and how to say it to get the absolute best out of them. And Phil Jackson is the all-time great at doing that. He knew which buttons to press. He knew which guys to wrap his arm around. He knew which guys to push harder. And he also knew when to step back and let players work it out amongst themselves. We'll get into it later, like the Steve Kerr and MJ fight. He knew how to manage all those egos into one cohesive unit and allow it to work. So yeah, in terms of relationship management, I mean, I think a lot of business professionals and people who are leaders, around the country today can take a lesson from Phil and basically just getting people to work together. People who probably in another world would hate each other, like Rodman and Michael and Pippen. When Pippen had some run-ins with Rodman when he was with the Pistons, and so did Jordan, and they were able to coalesce and work together. So, yeah, I think it speaks a lot to Phil Jackson's character and his ability. But let's dive into the content of the show a little bit further. It starts off with the '98 Eastern Conference Eastern Conference first round against the New Jersey Nets. And Michael, has some pretty strong opinions at the beginning of the series how it's going to go. He basically says the only way that the New Jersey Nets can beat us is if we're playing asleep. And they pushed him to an overtime in that first game. They eventually did complete the sweep, but the Nets gave them a run for their money. And a little known fact at the time, the head coach of the New Jersey Nets was Kentucky head coach John Calipari, and they gave him a little bit of a scare. Uh, and so I don't know what your thoughts were on kind of seeing that and seeing Michael's trash talk almost come back to bite him in the ass, as I'm sure it did several times over the course of his career.
Yeah, they even brought that up. Is this, could this affect the Bulls? How they come out of the gates, and luckily, Jordan said that in the first round. And they got that early wake up call. If this would have been in the semifinals, it could have been a lot more dangerous and to a better team. But I think at that point, and it shows throughout the episode that Jordan knew that he was going to do whatever it took to get his team to win. So he could get away with that trash talk. It's hard to say something, like they call it bulletin material, and back it up. But Jordan was a completely different animal.
Yeah, yeah. You don't write checks your mouth can't cash, or you don't let your mouth write checks your body can't cash. Whatever that saying is. But the way that the documentary is structured, we talk about it. It's kind of all over the place. So we end with the sweep of the Nets, and then we go all the way to back to '93 after they've defeated the Phoenix Suns, and Michael starts to discuss his relationship with his dad, and we all know as we're watching where this is leading, because this is very close to the time of the murder of James Jordan Sr., Michael's father. So on July 23rd, 1993. Jordan's best friend goes to pick up James Sr. at the airport to come in for a charity event for Michael. And he doesn't arrive. And the family assumes, oh, he's still golfing. He's still, at the property, whatever it is. A few days go by and they still haven't heard from him. They know something's really wrong. So a man search goes into effect looking for him, and they finally locate his car days later. And then about 20 days later, they locate his body on August 13th. And it's clear that he has been killed as a result of a robbery with gunshot wounds. And it's a really tragic moment, because I think anybody who has a close relationship with their father, understands, someday that their dad's not going to be around. And to have to face that is incredibly difficult. And then to have that become a reality, and for 20 days not knowing, where your dad is, if he's alive, you assume the worst. I have to imagine it was a really trying time for Michael and his family. But then to make it even more difficult is that people begin to speculate. Reckless journalists start to speculate about his murder being linked to Michael's gambling. And, I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because I certainly have mine, but I kind of wanted to get what your feeling was when that whole speculation kind of started to get mentioned in the same breath as, the tragedy of Michael losing his father.
Yeah, I think, the game plan in life is that, your parents grow old and die of natural causes. And whether you have a close relationship with them or not, when you have a deep relationship like he did with his father, and not only does he lose him early, he is murdered. It's not like he lost him to cancer or, an accident. This was obviously blatant murder. And I think during that time, was with his gambling issues. So I think that was the easy finger to point by the journalist to get that quote unquote clickbait. I don't think it was very professional of them. I think, like he said, these are people that didn't know who he was. I know last episode I was arguing with myself of whether Jordan had a gambling problem or not, but at the end of the day, I don't really think he did. It's his money; he can do whatever he wants with it. He wasn't doing anything illegal, and he obviously had the money to pay any huge debts. It was like $1.2 million debt that he had in that golfing bet, but Yeah, that's something that I grew up as a conspiracy, and obviously I was 3 years old, so I don't know what to believe at the time. So you hear that as a kid, and that's obviously an idea or the way that you think that it might have possibly happened. The way that they show it, I just don't see um, any way that it would be connected with his gambling. What I would like to see is those two 18-year-olds that they charged with murder, to see what, I'd like to pick their brains, see
Yeah.
why did they do it? What was the reasoning behind it? I mean, he was driving a Lexus, pulled over Parks. I mean, he's an easy target, but I don't think it was at all related to the gambling.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that it's really tragic that people, for the sake of of sensationalizing his death, decided to take it upon themselves to write a sexy story, to try and take something that was clearly tragic for a family and try and make it something more, just for the sake of selling newspapers or magazines, or getting up the list of jumping the corporate ladder at a newspaper or whatever it was. I think it's really easy when people are up on a pedestal to try and throw stones to knock them down. And the people that knew Jordan best, and even reporters like Sam Smith, who didn't always write positive, glowing things about him, say the guy who wrote the Jordan Rules, say that notion that this was linked to some seedy underbelly that Michael was involved with, was total bullshit. And to to grieve over the loss of a loved one is hard enough, but to have everybody, probably including some of your teammates, having to hear and maybe even to some extent believe that this was some vast conspiracy, surrounding the death of his father, it's just insulting, and it's, shame. I know hindsight's 2020, but it's kind of like shame on you. Like, like, without any proof, without any quotes or evidence, you just kind of tarnish a guy's character. And they did kind of the same thing with the Sports Illustrated piece, when he was trying to take a swing at baseball, no pun intended, um, which we'll get into. So Michael retires abruptly, like 5 days before the season starts, and largely because he had had conversations prior to his dad's death about uh, retiring and playing baseball. And I think for anybody, in any career, you start to get burnout and you feel like a change is needed. And Michael lived and breathed being Michael Jordan and playing basketball. It seemed like 24/7. I don't think the man had a single solitary second to himself. And they mentioned in the documentary that him deciding to go and play baseball for 21 months or whatever it was gave him an opportunity to understand what it was like to live life without his dad, without all the distractions of being Michael Jordan in the media. And yeah, to a certain extent, he's drawing huge crowds to Double A ball, and he's getting questions, and he's getting cover stories written about him in Sports Illustrated. But he's not Michael Jordan, the NBA superstar anymore. He's Michael Jordan, the former NBA superstar who's chasing this ridiculous dream. So I think for the sake of Michael's future success in the league, I think it was almost necessary for him to go away, because who knows if they repeat in 95 or 94, 95, and who knows what that does to his legacy. And it certainly adds to the mystique of the what ifs. But so Michael goes and starts playing baseball, and there's a lot of naysayers and people telling him he can't do it, including writers at Sports Illustrated. But what I think a lot of people don't understand, or didn't at the time, was how greatly it was motivated by the tragedy of losing his dad. So he goes and tries, probably from a picking it up and learning standpoint, one of the most difficult sports to catch up and learn. He hadn't played in 14 years. Um, so we were really young at the time. I was even younger than you were. Do you have any recollection? I mean, we've all seen Space Jam, and that kind of comes out around the same time as all this was happening. But do you have any recollection of that happening? And what are your thoughts now on that? Obviously have modern day examples like Tim Tebow of that happening, but it really is kind of a once in a lifetime story.
Yeah, no, and just to backtrack a little bit, to him going to baseball, yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. Imagine being the most popular person in the world, where you can't go anywhere without somebody knowing what you're doing. He just needed a break, and I think, like you said, him taking a break from from basketball um, made him that much better when he came back. Yes, he was a little rusty when he came back, but he was hungrier. Um, and to your point of remembering, I remember watching a game because, I'm pretty sure it was televised, even though he was in double A. I remember him being in right field. And you know how you have a memory of something that you think is like complete fact, but it ends up not being. I could have swore that he made it all the way up to the majors and played right field for the White Sox. It might have been like a spring training game or something like that. But um, yeah, in watching him, he was just bad. I mean, like, he looked like a horse on roller skates when they show him in the gym, walking around, and his swing was, I played baseball. I'm not a professional baseball player, but his swing was like, it was like a slap hit. It wasn't a power hit. He was just trying to put the bat on the ball. And I think that's why he was so successful in those first 13 games, because he was just seeing nothing but fastballs. It's real easy just to put the bat on the ball, but then once you start getting those breaking balls, it's a completely different ball game. But what was interesting to me was Terry Francona makes an appearance, which I didn't see coming. But not only Terry Francona, but Jerry, I don't know how to say his last name, the owner of the
Reinsdorf.
Bulls and the White Sox. Reinsdorf, yeah. Yeah, both of them truly believed that he could have made it up to the majors if he just would have had a little bit more time. Unfortunately, the baseball strike happened in the middle of it. And that says a lot just from seeing him, swing, seeing him throw. You see him try to catch a fly ball at the warning track. He just completely whiffs on it. But I think that tells you the type of athlete that he truly was. He wasn't a Bo Jackson or a Deion Sanders, but give him a little bit of time, he's going to get to that point. Maybe not nearly as successful, but he had just the pure athleticism to get there. And it was just all up to getting practice, getting the swings, getting his body ready for it. But yeah, I do slightly remember him playing baseball because, yeah, I mean, even when he's kind of like Tim Tebow. When Tim Tebow went to the minors, everybody covered him, So I do remember that. I thought that he played for the White Sox. He made it all the way up to the majors. But in my defense, that minor league team, they're both black and white, same color. Yeah. So it all runs together.
Probably some of that too is that, if I remember Space Jam correctly, they very much make it seem like he's in the majors in that movie. So
that could have been it.
That might be, because I think I'm with you. For some reason, until this week, I kind of got on a Jordan kick, and I watched the '92 Dream Team documentary again, and then I watched Jordan Rides the Bus to kind of, in preparation of this, knowing that this episode would cover his baseball stint, just trying to get a little bit more backstory to it. And yeah, as a kid, I watching Space Jam in 96, 97, 98, because I watched that movie so many times as a kid. They make it seem like he was in the majors, and I would probably want to do a little revisionist history too, because in 20 years people might think I played in the majors. Like Brian Scalabrine, after the Celtics won the finals, he's like, in 2 years, I'm going to tell because he didn't play a minute when the Celtics won the NBA championship. He was like, in a year, I'm going to tell my kids I came off the bench. In 5 years, I'm going to tell them I started. In 10 years, I'm going to tell them that I averaged 20 a game. And then in 30 years, I'm going to tell them I was the goddamn MVP. As time goes on, the stories get bigger and, they kind of change. But, as you mentioned, the baseball thing only lasted until the strike in 95. Or was it 94? 94 or 95?
It was 94. Yeah, 94 season. It was, I think, like the 93, 94 season for baseball. Because I remember being a kid, some strange fact. I remember my next door neighbor growing up had a ball from the 1993. It even said 93 opening day or whatever. And it was a ball that was never used that Rawlings printed out that I thought was kind of cool. But and then going back to Space Jam, I do remember Space Jam because I would have been 7, 8 years old, I think, when Space Jam came out. So that was right in my wheelhouse. That was I remember going to the theaters and seeing Space Jam. I remember buying the Space Jam CD, the soundtrack, like,
Yeah,
and having a Walkman, and like that was like, if you were 7, 8 years old when Space Jam came out and you had that soundtrack was like dope. Like, I mean, it was
yeah,
like Jock Jams before Jock Jams.
yeah. Because
You
they had
know,
the
Marvin
Bulls
Gaye, like, I just want
intro.
to fly,
Yeah, it was great.
or I think I can fly. Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
so in that season, that '94 season without Jordan, the Bulls lose in the conference semis to the Knicks without him. Knicks go on to lose to the Houston Rockets that year. And in that series, um, another moment sticks out where Scottie Pippen is not necessarily painted in the greatest light. And in the course of this documentary, Scottie has had some moments where it really runs, you know, contrary to what you've heard about Scottie his entire career. You know, you had him not getting the ankle surgery until the start of the regular season, and he has to miss 35 games in '98. And then you see even before that, he essentially refused to go into the game because Phil Jackson called a play to run through Tony Kukoc instead of Scottie. He asked Scottie to inbounds the ball. Now, as a coach, I always tell kids when we're playing defense out of and out of bounds, the most dangerous man on an inbounds play is the man inbounding the ball. So, there's a possibility that they collapse on Kukoc on a double off the ball. Scottie comes in and takes the game winner. Who knows how the play runs out? But Scottie quits on the team. He doesn't go in. Kukoc nails the shot anyway. Didn't need him. So it's this bittersweet moment where, okay, you fight back and you win this game on a game winner, and then you have to go in the locker room and look at your leader in the eye and be like, man, you fucking quit on us. And Bill Cartwright, who's a veteran on the team at the time, guy Michael Jordan was not too confident in his offensive abilities, but he could guard Ewing. He starts crying and tells Scottie to his face, like, you quit on us, man. Like, you straight up quit on us. Don't ever do that again. And Scottie, he apologizes and, then he says he does the wrong thing. But then flash forward to the documentary when they taped his interview. He still says to this day, I would do the
Yeah.
same thing, which shocked me. And I was like, wow, is Scottie Pippen a little bit more of a shit than we thought he was? Like, is he more of kind of an egomaniac than we thought? Maybe he isn't the, fly under the radar, do all the dirty work guy. Maybe he is a little ego driven. Because if you look at his career earnings, he earned $19 million more than Michael did over the course of his NBA career. Yeah, he played a little bit longer, but he still made more money than Michael. He knew he was going to get paid at the end of that season, and but he also knew he was chasing something special. So just play it out and see what happens. I don't hold
Yeah.
as high opinion of Scottie Pippen as I did before. He's still one of the 50 greatest players to ever play. But I thought that was an interesting part of this whole documentary, and I don't know if that has to do with Michael trying to make himself seem like more of the good guy with the production team. But Scottie Pippen does not come off great in The Last Dance.
Yeah, I think after these last two episodes, Scott Van Pelt always comes on, and he was talking to Jason Whitlock, and Jason Whitlock said the exact same thing. You know, he was worried that Scottie Pippen is now going to get this bad rep for this documentary, which he kind of has been. With the migraine, the ankle surgery, and then now this. And I think this is on a completely different level because he quit on the team. Like you said, we played sports. We've all had that one coach that we just didn't like playing for, but I've never had teammates that I might not have gotten along with them, but I'm still going to play for them. And I think that's a completely different level. He didn't quit on Phil Jackson. He quit on the rest of the team. And luckily, Tony Kukoc hit that shot to give him a chance in that series. But yeah, to your point, like, he says that he would do it all over again. Like, what? That is, for you to have that much time to think about what you did and to sit in that locker room after that game and have one of your teammates that you go through the ringer with through the entire season break down in tears and tell you how you let the team down, and you have all that time and you still would do that. Come on, like, that is extremely selfish, because that tells me he still wanted to take that shot. And like you said, I mean, he could have potentially got double teamed. Who knows? Luckily, like I said, Kukoc hit that shot, but yeah, that's extremely selfish on his end, because, like I said, he didn't quit on Phil Jackson. He quit on the coach,
Yeah.
or quit on the team. Excuse me.
And it's not like it was a regular season game. It was game 3 of the Eastern Conference semis. Like, it is one of them,
Right.
you're in the playoffs, man. It's win or go home. I mean, game 3, it's not win or go home, but every possession counts. And especially back in the 90s when scores were like 93 to 91,
Yeah.
it definitely
And
it definitely saltied my opinion of him a little bit. Not too much, because I think he's great on the jump on ESPN. I think he's a brilliant basketball mind. I think his accomplishments speak for themselves. But he had his moments, and maybe it's just one of those things where his temperament is one where it just builds and builds and builds, and it occurs in this flare up of a huge mistake. But even the big, people say, I wouldn't change anything about my life because it's made me the man or the person that I am today. But yeah, your experiences are your own. But I think about the really big mistakes that I've made that have hurt people, and I would 100% go back and change those. Like, in retrospect,
right.
you want to go back and change those moments where you hurt people. So for him to say it, maybe he's more of a stone cold killer than he thought, or maybe he's just a dick, So
Well, and to your point where they were at, I'm sorry, to your point where they were at in the season, you had mentioned money. To me, I've always been the type of person that you should play for the love of the game. The money's going to come no matter what. And you play to win the game. Hello.
Yeah.
You play.
Hello.
That's what sports are. Yeah. That's what sports are about. You don't just play sports just to play them. You play to say, I beat you. And for them to be in a critical, I think this would not be nearly as overblown if it was, game 10 of the season. But for the fact that it was in the playoffs, this was his chance to show what kind of leader he could be without Michael Jordan. Now, obviously, I think at the end of the day, he didn't want that leadership. He didn't want all the eyes on him. But when someone like Michael Jordan leaves the team and you're all that's left, basically, all focal points are going to be on you. So you're under the microscope. And the difference between how Michael Jordan handled being under the microscope and Scottie Pippen are two different stories.
Yeah, and I think that goes really well into how they ended episode 7, because I thought that was probably the most powerful and emotional episode. Because in the beginning, you deal with the death of Michael's father. And at the end of that episode, they kind of asked Michael about the way he treated his teammates. They showed some footage of him picking on Scott Burrell, during the 98 season when he was a rookie. And you see his interactions, and you see him dogging on guys when they're not giving 100% effort. And, he got into fights with teammates. He said controversial things about teammates. But Michael gets really emotional, and he tells the interviewer, winning has a price and leadership has a price. And he starts to get like a tear in his eye. And he said, I challenged players when they didn't want to be challenged, and I pushed them to do something because I wanted to win. And he gets really emotional, and he says, I never asked them to do. They know that Michael, he never asked me to do something that he didn't fucking do. And
right.
I got like choked up watching that. Like, just to see that, you think about Michael Jordan, who's known kind of by people who follow sports. Everybody who follows the NBA well knows that Michael Jordan is a dick. But you got to see where that comes from. And his observance of, I may have pushed guys too hard. I may have gone too far. I may have crossed the line. But I pushed them and took them to places that they didn't even think that they were capable of. I made them better because I expected their best. And I think it takes a lot of introspection to admit, I was wrong in a lot of cases. But at the same time, it had to be done.
Yeah, no, I think, to your point, this was, I think, the most emotional episode out of them all so far. I think, to me, these were my two favorite. I've seen some people that didn't really like them. But, like, to your point, he was a dick. I don't care if you're an asshole to me if we get to the top of the mountain. If you're going to be an asshole and you're going to slow me down and you're going to slow the team down, then get the fuck out. But if you're going to be an asshole and when you know that the base of that motivation is to get to the highest of high, then you should be able to deal with it. I think, he even said, or Steve Kerr had mentioned it, that Jordan had said, if you can't take this pressure from me, you're not going to be able to take the pressure from the NBA playoffs. And he's 110% right. And my favorite quote was, when Jordan said, I wanted to win, but I wanted the team to be a part of it as well. I think I get a little bit of flack at work when I did have a job, of being a little bit of an asshole to some of my coworkers. But that's because, I want them to be pulling the same weight that I'm pulling. I want us to be successful. And I think they even touched on it in the episode that, off the court, Michael Jordan was relatable. He was the nicest guy. You see him, like you said, give Scott Burrell shit through the entire episode. And then Scott Burrell brings some of his friends from UConn into the locker room, and Jordan sits there on the training table, signs autographs, shoots the shit with them, asks about him. That's because he cared about Scott, and he gives Scott, you can see he gives Scott a little bit of shit during the interaction with Scott's friends, but it's from a place of caring, all love. And, like he said, I think he might have made Scott a better player than what he was. Now, I don't think Scott Burrell was an awesome player by any means, but he probably was a lot better than what he could have been without Jordan. And I don't think that you see that nowadays in sports. In sports, it's it's a popularity contest, and I think that's not just in the NBA. It is throughout, and I think you got to know your audience. Like, for example, Pat Mahomes is buddy with all of his all of his teammates like Tyreek and Kelsey, but that's because he's got a different kind of bond with those players than Jordan did with his teammates. So you gotta have to know who your audience is, and I think Jordan knew more about those players and their abilities than even some of them did.
Yeah, 100%. And that kind of carries us into 98. And we kind of get to see where they're at in 1998 after beating the Nets. And then you also kind of get to see him coming back for that 95 season and revving up for it. One of my favorite characters in this whole thing is B.J. Armstrong. He seems like the nicest guy, but also, like, when you piss him off, like, you do not want to fuck with him. Because he was a little guy. He made the All-Star team the year Jordan was gone. But he just brings this level of, like, calmness and, like, level-headedness and objectivity to the documentary. He'll tell you straight about Michael, but he'll also praise him for everything that he did well. And then you see him in that 98 conference semis against the Hornets just take off against his former teammates. He hits a game-winning shot and calls out Phil. He calls out Michael. He makes sure that they know that he was the one that just beat him. And with how well he knew Michael, he should have known what the end result was going to be. You may have won the battle against Michael, but you do that shit, and you damn well aren't going to win the war.
Yeah, no, that was a head scratcher for me because, they even go back into it. I think it was either episode 8 or 7 when Jordan called BJ up when Michael was playing baseball and during the strike, and they go get breakfast together, and obviously they had a good relationship, and BJ's like, hey, come to the facility. So he had to have known that, like, and I think that even goes back or goes to Seattle's head coach. What's his name? I'm drawing a blank on him. Seattle's head coach. Yes. Yeah. So you have to know who you're dealing with. And it's like, why would you poke the bear?
Yeah.
I get where BJ's emotions come from in that game because it's, like he said, they had no chance of beating the Bulls. So he took his moment and he shined. And going back to playing sports, we've all played against friends in competitive sports. And when I was playing against my friends that were on another team, I tried to elevate my game a little bit more because, I think it made the competition a lot better because you had that bragging, right? and he took his moment, and unfortunately, I think he just took it a little too far, and he wasn't. I don't think he realized what he was doing at that moment. He was just enjoying what he was able to do at that time, and didn't understand the repercussions that were about to come his way. And yeah, that was just a head scratcher for me. He just let the moment get a little bit too big for him, but at the same time, I mean, like I forget who made the comment. It was like when Muhammad Ali, you found out Muhammad Ali could take a punch, could finally get punched. So he ran with it. BJ really ran with it, and good for him. He had his one shining moment, but it ended up costing him in the end.
Yeah, and as Michael showed him, no one makes him bleed his own blood. And he took care of the Hornets in efficient fashion, winning the series 4-1. And again, it's hard to kind of go do this in like timeline order because of the flash forward and flashback. But
right,
you see the conclusion of the '95 playoffs when Jordan comes back that April to play, and they eventually lose to the Magic in the Eastern Conference Finals or Eastern Conference Semis, one or the other. And Michael comes back wearing number 45, which was the number he wore with the Birmingham White Sox and the number that he wore originally when he first started playing basketball. And Nick Anderson makes a comment like 23 is like the greatest of all time. Like 45's, not his airness. He's got a little rust on him. So Michael changes the jersey the next night, goes back to 23, and has a game against the Magic. Now, it's ultimately all for naught because the Magic end up winning that series and going on to face Houston in the NBA Finals that year. And that was a great Magic team, one that probably should have won a championship. And that's another one of those what-if teams with Shaq and Penny Hardaway and Horace Grant and Nick Anderson and a large collection of talent. But after that loss, Michael hadn't really been training for basketball up to that point. And that summer, he's got to go film Space Jam. So he gets Warner Brothers to basically build him a state-of-the-art pop-up facility. And I think he essentially, they talk about it, he brings all these NBA guys in to run fives with him while he's there, in between him lifting weights and filming the movie. But Mike kind of tricked him into basically every big foe he had coming up against him in the East. Reggie and Patrick Ewing and all these guys, gets him to come out. Oh, yeah, sure, we'll come out to L.A. and play pick up with Michael. And he got secret intel on what Reggie had been working on in the offseason, what Patrick had been working on in the offseason. And he geared up for, until 2016, the greatest regular season in the history of the NBA. That following season, the Bulls go 72-10, cruise to the NBA Finals, and ultimately defeat the Seattle Supersonics, who had the best record in the West that year, pretty handedly. It did go 6 games, but yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts on, if you were a competitor of Michael's, why would you want to go to Los Angeles, help him get better at basketball for an entire summer, just come back and start dominating the league again? Like, what in your right mind would drive you to do something like that? Because most of those guys weren't even in the fucking movie.
Right. Yeah, I think what Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing was in Space Jam, and I can't remember who else.
Sean Bradley and Muggsy Bogues.
Yep. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. And no, yeah, that's kind of. I think that kind of goes back to the type of competitor that Jordan was. I know for a fact that Jordan did not pitch any of that as, hey, I want to see how you guys play. He pitched it as, dude, I just got Warner Brothers to build me this badass dome out in LA. Let's just play some ball, and if I'm Reggie Miller, if I'm not turning that down. You're telling me to go out to Warner Brothers studio to play basketball, some pickup games. Yeah, I'm going to do that. But yeah, like I said, that's the type of competitor he was, because I think those players were there just thinking, hey, we're going to have a good time. Let's just check this out and get to play some ball. Well, Jordan is taking this as two things. I get to see how my competitors are doing, because these are young guys that he doesn't have much scouting report on. And he even said it himself with these younger guys. I think it conditioned him a lot better. It got him into that basketball shape a lot quicker than what anybody else could do, because he's run the floor with younger guys, and he's getting a little bit older now, but that got him in shape. And yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I mean, I thought it was crazy because he's Jordan's sitting there saying, well, I need to work out. Warner Brothers says, okay, no problem. We'll build you a state of the art Jordan dome, if you will. That has nothing to do with the movie, outside of just getting him into shape.
Yeah. So yeah, it was just an incredible. I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, you played right into his hand. Like, at this point, y'all have been playing with Michael, for some of you guys, for a decade. You got to be smarter than that. But so
Yeah.
fast forward to the '96 finals. Kind of bring this Michael's relationship with his father full circle. Um, Michael wins the NBA finals in Chicago on Father's Day, Game 6. To that point, uh, I think Michael hadn't fully come to grips with it, at least the way that they had talked about it. But then you see the emotion that he showed after winning it. It was more emotional than he had won his first in '91. He was like hyperventilating on the floor, like crying so hard. And another moment that just kind of brought a tear to my eye, where you see that he's human, and you see that he feels just as much as anybody else. He has good days and bad days, and his heart breaks just like the rest of ours can. I thought that was a really humanizing moment, and it's a shame that it felt like he was under a microscope, because you see him having this raw moment, and then you see all these cameras on the floor like crowded around him. And today, people would probably look at that and say, "Oh, look at him staging that." But you could hear it in those sobs. Like, that was raw, pure, unadulterated emotion that we saw from Michael then. And that had to have just been like, while it's probably so sweet to come back and win a championship in your first full year back, it probably had to just be so heartbreaking to think, this is the first ship I'm winning without my dad to celebrate with. And that's got to be hard.
Yeah, and I think even backtrack a little bit more. Them losing to the Magic, they talked. I forget who it was. It wasn't Bill Paxton. It was the other tall white guy. Said them losing to Orlando might have been the best thing for Michael and the team, because his trainer, even said usually Michael will take a few weeks off, and hey, hit me up whenever you're ready. Michael said, "I'll see you tomorrow." And I think, like you said, full circle. It's on top of losing his father. He showed it wasn't just losing his father. I think it was the comeback. I think that was really what was setting in for him. That look how hard I worked in pretty much a year to get my body from playing one professional sport to another. And yeah, like I said, pure emotion. I can't imagine winning something and being just completely swarmed. My dad had stepped down, and that scene happened to be playing. And my dad coached basketball for 30 years in KCK, and was a big Jordan fan. And he even said, he's like, "How can you not like Michael Jordan?"
Yeah.
After this, I know this whole documentary is supposed to paint Michael Jordan in this very limelight-esque, but it's pretty raw too, because like we said earlier, he even admitted he was an asshole. I think he knew everything of what he was doing, but he knew that at the end of the tunnel, he could get any team to where he wanted them to be. And I think he even said that, like, at the end of episode 7, like, if you want to play that way, referring to not the way that I expect, then go ahead and play. And that made him emotional, because you could tell that he cared that much, because he wanted the best out of everybody. And I think, like I said, just, yeah, I can't imagine, losing your best friend, and that's the first time without him.
Yeah.
you know.
And, just kind of put put a kind of a cap on this Michael Jordan conversation until next week. Um, yeah, to your point, I've grown. I always admired and loved Michael Jordan as a kid. Growing up playing basketball, playing for a little bit in high school as a guard. I wasn't a point guard. I played the two. It was D Wade, Kobe, and then Michael Jordan, who I wanted to play like. I would do the Jordan on Craig Elo against the Cavs shot in my backyard because that was kind of the way my yard was set up. It was perfect. I'd come right across the free throw line and do it. But this documentary has made me, as an adult, embrace Michael Jordan, the person, more than I had previously. To hear his attitude about winning, to hear his attitude about making himself and his teammates better at the same time, and asking for your best and not settling for anything less, for paying your dues, for taking the bumps and the bruises, and still coming out on top at the end. It says a lot, and I think you can either admire him for it, you can point out the faults, but still admire him for it. And I think this documentary should let people know it's okay to look at him objectively and say, okay, yeah, he did some things that were a little distasteful and probably wrong. But at the end of the day, you have to admire the work ethic, the commitment, the passion that he played with, and the example that he set for generations. I mean, people still today want to be like Michael Jordan. And, people talk about the comparisons of LeBron James to Michael Jordan or Kobe to Michael Jordan. In my opinion, there hasn't been one since, and I don't think there ever will be one in terms of his competitiveness, his intensity, and the way he played the game.
Yeah, and I think something that I was going to touch on, and I think it's a great transition, is I truly hope that this documentary series rejuvenates a generation to play like Michael. I know LeBron is a great role model right now, but I think that's apples to oranges of their play styles, their leadership styles, and I think not to sound like an old person, but I think that's kind of what this next generation really kind of needs is kind of a different work ethic. Not to say that LeBron doesn't have any great work ethic or anything right now, but it's just completely, it's a different style of work ethic. And I'd like to see that work ethic that Jordan had kind of come back. I think you're going to get better players from that style of work ethic. Now that's just my opinion, but yeah, I hope that there's families that are watching this. There's little kids that are watching this that are now recaptured by Jordan. I think, obviously Kobe and LeBron have the limelight right now, but I think, it would be interesting to see a new generation that was technically kind of like raised on these documentaries that does go back and watch the games and wants to be more like Mike and less like LeBron.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And, even today, Trace McGrady said today he wishes when he was a young player that he had seen The Last Dance and he could see what it truly takes, the amount of sacrifice that it takes, sacrificing time with your family, and your friends, sacrificing your life essentially for the sake of greatness. Because you've got all the time in the world after your playing days are over to sit back and, smoke a cigar, sip a little bourbon, and enjoy the memories. But while you're in it, you only get one shot at it. Some guys don't even get a chance to play in a championship. And Michael took advantage of all 6 opportunities he had, and he won all 6. And so if you love him or hate him, you got to tip your cap to him. And if he's not the greatest player in someone's opinion, he's got to at least be 2. And if he's not 1 or 2, I don't value your opinion as a basketball fan. So that's.
Yeah, I would echo that. Yeah, I would echo that. Yeah. No, it's funny you say Tracy McGrady because, yeah, I mean, I grew up on Jordan, but Tracy McGrady was right behind him, and I've never owned a pair of Jordans. My first basketball shoes were the T-Max, like the first like Tracy McGrady's. I remember busting those out in like 8th grade, and I felt like I could fly.
Yeah.
And I was probably like 5 foot at the time.
I had a pair of T-Max when I was in 7th grade, And yeah, T-Mac was huge because he was still with the Magic at the time, and like I was obsessed with
Hmm.
Tracy McGrady. Um, yeah, the T-Mac Adidas shoes were like the hot ones to have back in the day. Um, that I and so to the last prompt on the rundown, I had to do a lot of convincing with my mom for her to get me a pair of the T Max because my parents were always like, we're not we're not spending $150 on a new pair of basketball shoes. You get out that East Bay catalog and you try and find the coolest but cheapest shoe you can find. So that was always a battle. But in spirit of Mother's Day, Smitty, you wanted us to discuss our favorite moments with mom as kids, and so I've got a lot of great memories with my mom, but I've tried to do my best to kind of narrow them down. Um, so do you want to kick that off, or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, no, it's funny you say that because my mom, anybody that's listening that knows my mom, she was definitely like the cool mom. She let me throw parties in high school. I remember being like 15 or 16, and I just straight up asked my mom. I was like, "Mom, could you buy me a Playboy?" And she went to the store and got me one. So she was definitely the cool mom. And I never had a lot of bad memories with her, but one of my favorite memories, it was bad for me, but one of my favorite memories was probably about the only time that I ever got grounded by my mom. So my dad was a PE teacher and a coach, and so he brought home an archery set that they used to do back. That we did archery in like sixth grade. I don't think kids do it nowadays, but with the dull tip arrows. So my buddy and I, we had this great idea that we'd take these arrows, these dull tip arrows, and we'd shoot them straight up into the air. So we're out in the front yard, and I've got my bow and arrow, and I just cock that thing all the way back, and I just launch it, and we would run under the house and wait for the arrow to come back down. Most of them hit the dirt, and they're like a foot in the ground. Some of them hit the street and would bounce like 30 feet in the air. Well, one of the last ones, the last one I ever did, I shoot it straight up in the air, and the wind takes it, and my mom's car was parked down the driveway. This thing comes down and hits her trunk, and just boom! I mean, a big bang.
Oh
And I
shit!
don't think my mom's never came out of the house quicker than that. And she just ripped me a new asshole and grounded me. It put a dent in her trunk, probably the size of like, I don't even know, probably about the size of like a baseball. And
Damn.
luckily, like I said, it was a dull tip, so it didn't like pierce the metal or
Yeah.
anything like that. Um, but yeah, she came out and ripped me a new asshole. And yeah, I told my buddy, I was like, well, I'll see you tomorrow. And yeah, she grounded me for the night, and that was about it.
Oh damn.
So that was probably one of my favorite memories from her. But yeah, like you said, I've got millions of memories with my mom.
Yeah. Yeah. Growing up, my mom was fun, but definitely like I never got grounded by my mom. It was always by my dad. My mom was like the softer one, but um, when I made my mom mad, like that, I knew I really crossed the line. But probably my favorite memory, and if she ever listens to this, it'll probably surprise her that this is my favorite memory. But I went to the same school, preschool through eighth grade, so I knew all of the same people like since I was like, you know, 4 years old. Um, and my mom, until my second sister was born, had taught high school English um, as her career at Shawnee Mission East High School. And when I was going into eighth grade, they had the eighth grade homeroom position open up um, for eighth grade homeroom and science teacher. And my mom got asked by the principal if she would consider like coming out of retirement to teach. Retirement, like my mom was like in her 30s at the time, and my mom decided she wanted to come back and teach. She asked me first, and she was like, "Would you care if I like was the other eighth grade homeroom for like your last year of school at this school? Top dog, finally got to eighth grade, like BMOC, whatever it was." And I wasn't cool by any means, but it definitely wasn't going to help being cool if my mom was the other homeroom teacher. So I was like, being a good son, I was like, no, I don't care if you teach, like, that's fine. But I was really apprehensive and totally like scared about it. And, there were some times where I like wasn't a huge fan of her being a teacher because like my friends would get in trouble and then they'd be pissed at me. But honestly, some of my favorite memories of my mom are like just like spending time with her after school, like working in her classroom on homework, and just like getting to be around my mom like all day. Like she'd be shocked to hear this because I don't really tell her it enough, and I probably should. But I really enjoyed that year of school having her like right next door. Knew if like it definitely kept me in line because any trouble I got in was like I didn't even have to wait to get home to hear about it. Like I was going to hear about it at school. Um, but just having her around all the time, and she still teaches there to this day. So like I coach some of her students, and I get to connect like with her on like the kids she still has in her homeroom, and they ask me about her, and they ask her about me when they're in class. They're like, Mrs. Randolph, did you see your son today? Like all that kind of stuff. So when she took that job, it really kind of changed like our just kind of our whole life. Like we're very much a part of that community at St. Elizabeth still to this day. And I think a large part of it has to do with my mom, still being there and being like one of the main faculty people at the school. So that's definitely my favorite memory. And it's still one because it's still ongoing. So it still keeps me connected
Yeah.
with that community there. So it's real special. So
Yeah.
I think that wraps up the show. We're about 10 minutes shorter. I think that shows mathematically Sawyer's only worth about 10 minutes of show time. So see how it goes next week when he's back on the ones and twos.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we get a lot of 5-star ratings after this episode, we might have to have some hard talks. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Have some
I
tough
mean, after the last
conversations.
episode of me being blacked out, that was fun one to listen to. I was like, man, did we even get to any of this stuff that we talked about? And yeah, I woke up the next morning with the light still on and my jeans on, and yeah, I was hurting the next day. So
It
yeah,
was
I went to 0 to 100 like real quick. I was like, oh yeah, I was like, I'm ready to do this episode, and then like I said, probably like talking about Alex Smith for like 45 minutes.
yeah.
I
I
got
only
blacked out.
I only realized the mute feature like in the last minute of the episode. I wish I had discovered it a lot
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah. I was like, after I got done listening to the episode, I was like, dude, those guys have to like hate me after that one. I was just talking so much shit. Like one of my
we
buddies was like, dude, you didn't let them talk. I was like, yeah, I know.
we were laughing about it. We thought it was hilarious. Sawyer was like, I think it added some spice to the show. So maybe we'll have another one here in
Yeah,
the
no,
future.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say we will have to do a drunk podcast for sure. I've always wanted to do like a drunk history podcast. I think that would be fun. Yeah.
That would be fun. Well, all right. Well, Smitty, great seeing you as always. For all of our listeners out there, have a great week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and pray that sports come back sooner than later.
Peace.
Peace.